Hello, everyone, and welcome to a wonderful episode of the Duck Zone. The NFL season is moving right along. We are in week 6. College football is in week 7. A lot of stuff happening in sports, but we're going to be focusing on football on this episode because there's a lot to talk about. We're just gonna jump right into it. James, how you doing? Wedding week. It's gonna be exciting.
Yeah, big week. I'm excited. It's weird that wedding week is here, but got to just go with it. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm sure it'll be fine.
It's gonna be fun. It'll be a good time. Um,
It'll all work out.
Well, while the wedding's happening, football still goes on. We're going to make our picks, and we're going to talk about last week first. So let's jump into the NFL. James, what's your notes from last week?
Well, I think the big one that we saw happen either yesterday or it might have been the day before. I guess it was yesterday morning. Uh, Robert Sala got fired, and we kind of called that. We said he was on the hot seat. So that actually finally came to fruition. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I obviously I'm not a Jets fan, so I don't really care. But he seemed like he was a decent head coach. He didn't really have the chips fall his way. Obviously, last year with Rodgers getting hurt, and this year has not been a great start. But anyways, that transitions to my first note, which was the NFL is literally impossible to predict, and that's why we love it. So with that said, obviously the solid news was big. I actually really haven't even looked in to see. I'm assuming one of their coordinators will probably fill in as head coach. Haven't
Defensive coordinator.
dived deep into that. Is it okay? So the big news from that game on the London game was the Vikings won and they stayed undefeated. Um, and we'll get to Salah later. I have another question to pose for you later on about or in relation to Salah. But the Vikings staying undefeated uh, is kind of the big news. The Chiefs also remain undefeated, and somehow injuries don't matter to them. They just continue to win. The Jaguars got off the schneid. We no longer have any winless teams in the NFL. So congrats to the Jags. They're still bad, but they got to win. Jaden Daniels is really good, and the Commanders, I think, are a force to be reckoned with. And I think it's safe to say that they're obviously ahead of schedule, but I think they're a good team. Stephon Diggs and his Texans took down the Bills in a revenge game for Diggs. So Texans bounced back. Or bounced back? Maybe they did they lose? I can't remember now.
They've been kind of like they played the Jacksonville the week before. Didn't look great. They beat them.
Oh, that's right. But I think they lost the week before that. Regardless, we like the Texans. They're a good team. That was still a big matchup against the Bills. Revenge game for Diggs. Texans pull it out. Caleb Williams is starting to figure it out. He's finally starting to toss TDs and not interceptions, and he's starting to look like possibly the number one quarterback that was taken in the draft. The big upsets of the week were the Giants upsetting the Eagles and the Cardinals upsetting the Niners. I don't think any of us saw that coming, and I know in our picks we did not have that. The Cowboys are a weird 3-2 team. Talk about 3 wins where they could easily be 0-5. They're squeaking out wins. They don't look good. Their defense is terrible. Their offense, I will say, is not good compared to what we thought it should be. And from the teaser I said a little while ago, I'll end with this. The teaser with in regards to Salah. The 49ers and the Jets are both 2-3. Who is going to right the ship first? And obviously the Salah news might dampen the Jets a little more, but it's not like the Niners have been playing well either. So Sean, both those teams are 2-3. Who will right the ship first?
Well, I think tonight is a big indication of it with San Francisco going to Seattle. San Francisco loses to Seattle in Seattle. They're going to fall to 0-3 in their own division. That's really tough to bounce back from. The Jets also sitting in a division that's just not very good. New England, Buffalo, Miami, all not what we thought they would be, not great. I mean, New England we thought wasn't going to be great, but Buffalo and Miami definitely have underachieved. I mean, it's interesting to say. I think the Jets have a better chance because the division's been so bad, but the Niners, I just feel like they've got so much talent. They've been hurt. I think the Niners do end up turning it around, and I still think the Niners win the West, mainly because the Rams are bad. The Cardinals just aren't there yet, and I'm just not all in on Seattle. Some weeks they look really good, and some weeks they look really bad. Um, San Francisco might be able to win that division with 10 wins and just squeak on it.
Oh, there you have it.
Yeah.
Both teams are in interesting situations, and I mean, again, I've said this before on previous podcasts. This might be this is kind of a stupid thing to say, but this year's NFL season seems insanely hard to predict. And I know every year, I'm sure if we went back and looked at previous years, they're all hard to predict. But like, even the Vikings at 5-0, hell, even the Chiefs. I mean, like, who is the best team in the NFL right now? I mean, based on record, I wouldn't just give it to the Vikings or give it to the Chiefs by any means. But
Yeah,
yeah, I don't know. That's why we
it's
love this sport, and that's why we talk about it.
it's really hard to really differentiate against some of these teams right now. It's really hard to say this team's really good. I mean, the only thing I can really walk away from everything right now is there's a couple teams that are really bad. New England is really bad. Carolina is really bad. Outside of those two teams, Tennessee is pretty bad. Miami's horrible without a quarterback. Miami wants to get two of
Jaguars.
them. Yeah, I mean, even the Jaguars are competitive though. I mean, they've lost games, but they've been
That's true.
competitive outside of that Miami game. Sorry, not Miami, the Buffalo game. Outside of the Buffalo game, they've been in games. I mean, they could easily be 3-2 right now had the ball bounced a little bit differently. Um, but Carolina's really bad, and New England's really bad. But the rest of the league is just kind of like anything can happen on any given day. It feels like. Um, I mean,
Yeah, I think
one
that's why I love the NFL because in college you have so many more blowouts, and in the NFL, even if you're the worst team, like the year the Browns went 0-16, they're still losing games by like 3 points, 7 points, 10 points. Like it's not the NFL is insane when it comes to
yeah.
parity.
I mean, here's a stat for you. So through 5 weeks, the team that has been favored to win by the most amount of points, those teams are 1-7. There's been a couple weeks where it's been the same margin, but teams are 1-7 that are the most favored to win. Just kind of gives you an idea of just like
Interesting.
it's crazy. With that said, we'll jump into our picks and we'll start going game by game here. 14 game slate this upcoming week, week 6 of the NFL. And it starts out with a good divisional matchup that we've already talked about. San Francisco going to Seattle. Who do you got in that one?
I like the Niners on the road. I think that they bounce back. They, well, yeah, I'm still going to take the Niners. They had Jake Moody, their kicker, stupidly tried to go for a tackle in the Cardinals game and hurt himself, and he couldn't kick any field goals for the rest of the game, which led to the Cardinals defense playing very well. I shouldn't say Jake Moody getting hurt led to that, but with him being out, the Niners had to go for it more on fourth down. They didn't really have a kicker. I guess they didn't trust their punter well enough to to kick anything. But the Cardinals defense pitched a shutout in the second half. If Moody's healthy, obviously that's going to help the Niners a lot because they can actually kick a field goal. Granted, if he is hurt, they're going to sign someone to come in. But I like the Niners on the road. I think their defense stiffens up a bit, and Jordan Mason is filling in very, very nicely for Christian McCaffrey. So Ayuk broke out last game. So I like the Niners on the road here. Just they have to win. They need a division win.
This is a weird one in the aspect of Week 6, and everyone thought I would say San Francisco probably has a must-win here. They probably have to win this game. They can't go to 0-3 in the division. It's going to be tough sledding to come back from that, even in a bad division. I think this is a must-win, which is tough to say going up to Seattle on a Thursday night. Going to Sunday's game, another game in London. We're in that series right now. Jacksonville playing their yearly trip over there, playing in Chicago.
Yeah, if this is anything like last week's London game, it'll probably be pretty clunky. Um, I know last week I took the Bears because of their defense. This week I'm taking the Bears, but because of Caleb Williams, I think he and their defense. I mean, their defense is still pretty stout, but I like Caleb Williams. His trajectory is just going up, like I talked about. So I like the Bears in London.
I also took the Bears. Also in the back of my mind, though, I realized Jacksonville does play well in London. They're quite accustomed to playing over there. I don't think Trevor Lawrence has ever lost in London. I might be wrong there, but I think he's undefeated in London. But I will take Chicago. They're playing well. And Jacksonville just has a little bit of inconsistencies going on right now. Arizona going to Green Bay. Who do you got in this one?
Well, I think the Cardinals' road juju dried up a little in San Francisco. Asking them to go on the road twice and winning at the Niners, at the Packers is tough, and Lambeau is no joke. I mean, we're not in the dreary Midwest winters quite yet, but Lambeau's still a tough place to play. So I like the Packers at home.
I'm going to take the Packers as well in that one. Nothing to add. Indianapolis heading to Tennessee.
This one's interesting because the Titans had a bye, so they've had basically 2 weeks to prepare for this game. And I don't think we quite know the health yet on Anthony Richardson. I know their head coach came out and said that he is the guy when he's healthy, he's going to start. Regardless if it's Flacco or Richardson, I just haven't seen enough out of the Titans to really believe in them. So I'm going to take the Colts here on the road.
I got nothing to add. I got the same thing. Colts win. Houston heading to New England.
I like Houston. I think even though Nico Collins most likely isn't going to play in this game, I think Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs are perfectly capable of handling the 1 and 2 role rather than the 2 and 3. We might get Joe Mixon back. That would just obviously help Houston's run game and potentially Dameon Pierce to spell Mixon. But I don't think there's any reason to, I know the Patriots are at home, and we got the news yesterday that Drake May is going to start. So, sorry, Drake May, you're a rookie. This is your first start. You're not going to win this game. So, Houston on the road.
This is a tough rookie assignment, first game assignment. Houston's got a good defense. I actually kind of see this as being the easiest game of the week to pick. Therefore, watch New England win. I've got Houston. But I think this is the easiest one. I think Drake May looks good. I think the offense looks better than it's been. But I think Houston pulls it out in the end. And I think we walk away saying New England's got life. So, Tampa Bay heading into New Orleans, as you said earlier. We may be seeing a new quarterback in New Orleans. Who do you got in this one?
I like the Bucks on the road, especially if either Jake Hayner, or Spencer Rattler start. Hayner's a second-year player. Rattler's a rookie, so Rattler hasn't even seen the field yet. Regardless, they're not Derek Carr, so that's going to significantly affect the offense. The Bucks also don't have to really travel later on in the week because they have been in New Orleans since Tuesday due to the hurricane. So they're acclimated. They've been there. They're practicing, and Baker Mayfield and company are going to get the job done. So Bucks on the road.
I got the Bucks as well. Nothing to add. Cleveland heading into Philadelphia.
Yeah, Cleveland's a mess. Every week I feel like we mention that there needs to be a quarterback change, and every week they don't make that change, and they keep coming out saying that Watson's their guy. Well, if Watson's your guy, you're not winning games. Eagles have had 2 weeks to prepare. It's at home in Philly. The Philly crowd's always raucous. So I think the Eagles win handedly, double digits. I'll say Eagles at home.
Yeah, I got the Eagles as well. These two teams really desperately need something good to happen. I feel like both these teams have been kind of in a spiral all season. Um, but Philly coming off of the break, that break probably came at a great time to kind of reset things, get some guys healthy. Um, but I'll take Philly, and Cleveland is amazingly a mess. It's a mess. There's a lot of problems there. One of the more, I think this is probably one of the best games of the week, and the line is weird in my opinion. Washington heading to Baltimore. Baltimore is favored by 6.5.
Yeah, that seems like a lot, especially with how both these teams are playing. I mean, the Ravens, I think, are one of the best teams with the amount of losses they have. Like, I still think the Ravens might even be the best team in the NFL. I think this is a humbling moment, though, for Jaden Daniels. He's had a near flawless start to his NFL career, and I think Lamar Jackson is gonna, you know, show Jaden Daniels this is how you win in the NFL. So I like the Ravens at home, and I think we see the first average to subpar outing from Jaden Daniels. This will be, 2 3 years from now when an interview with Jaden Daniels happens and they ask him his welcome to the NFL moment. I'm gonna say that this is gonna be his welcome to the NFL moment because things have been a little too easy for him.
So I actually think the exact opposite's going to happen. I've got Washington. Baltimore has really struggled against the pass this season. They got lit up last week against Burrow, just literally just throwing all over the field. They got lit up earlier with against Dallas. Prescott threw all over him, and then even in the second week of the season, Gardner Minshew tore them apart. So I mean, this is not a very good passing defense, or at least early season showing. I think Jaden Daniels is going to just continue doing what he's doing. I think they're going to have no problem running up and down the field. And at the exact same time, I think Baltimore is going to run up and down the field the same way. This could be another 38-35 game. I expect a lot of exploring, a lot of scoring, a lot of explosive plays. But I think Washington pulls it out. And the fact that Baltimore had to play that extra quarter, playing that extra quarter, that overtime game is always daunting. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it does wear on you a little bit. I think that defense is going to be even a little bit more tired. So I'm going to take Washington. I'm just not sold on that Baltimore defense. So going into the afternoon games, LA Chargers taking on the Denver Broncos in Denver. Who do you got?
I have the Chargers on the road, and I think mainly just because they are also a team that had a bye this past week, and that's given John Harbaugh enough to draw up a good game script. Broncos offense isn't good. Bo Nix has had his struggles. Broncos are winning games because of their defense, and now they very much can. Well, obviously, they very much can win this game. Anyone has a chance to win in the NFL. But I like the Chargers on the road. I just don't think their defense will do as great as they have been recently. But with no offense, I think the Chargers can run on them, and with a healthy Herbert, can toss some TDs as well.
No, nothing to add here. Chargers, I think, win. That bye week also coming at like a crucial time. So we're just say it that early in the season, but they just need to get healthy. They need to get their head on right. I'm going to take the Chargers to win in that one. Pittsburgh taking on the Raiders.
I think the steel curtain comes back into effect and the defense ramps back up. I like the Steelers on the road. The Raiders, another team where it's just like very subpar offense. They don't really have many playmakers, especially when Devontae Adams is still on the trade block and trying to get shipped out of Vegas. We did see a quarterback change in last week's game, so I'm curious to see if Aiden O'Connell starts or if they go back to Minshew. but there's just really not a lot going right for the Raiders. So I like the Steelers on the road.
Yeah, this is a weird one for me. This just screams an upset. I'm taking Vegas for no reason outside of the fact of this team has to just show up at some point. Um, they've looked really bad, and Pittsburgh, offensively they're just not there yet. Defensively, they look great. Vegas is just a weird team. I don't know what to say about them. After last week's just very very soulless game, just getting rocked by Denver, I just have a feeling they come in, they somehow steal this one out, and we kind of look back on it and say that was weird. How'd that happen? I think a quarterback change does happen. Aiden O'Connell probably starts, and maybe that gives them a little bit of life, but who knows? I don't know. It's one of those weird ones I just paused on and said, Vegas. All right, one of the best games of the week, or in my opinion, one of the better games of the week. Detroit taking on Dallas in Dallas.
I like the Lions here. Again, my reasoning, they've had a bye. They've had time to, you know, rest a little more, get a little more healthy. It's one more week for Laporta to, rest and get healthy. He hasn't been a huge part of the offense yet, but, we know he is pretty important to that offense. The Cowboys, like I talked about earlier, just they haven't shown me really anything. Their defense is awful, and their offense just isn't moving the ball that well. And I think a lot of that can be attributed to their run game. I think Dowdell gives them a better opportunity when it comes to the run. They were obviously giving Ezekiel Elliott carries early on in the season, and it looks like he's starting to be pretty washed. So if Dowdell or Dowdle, however you pronounce it, if he can really open up the run and show that they can actually move the ball via the run, that just makes Dak look a lot better. So I think this will be a close game, but I think the Lions squeak it out on the road.
Yeah, I got the Lions as well. Not a very exciting one here. Atlanta taking on Carolina in Carolina. Somehow that's an afternoon game.
So this is a divisional matchup, but I think the Falcons just are the better team. We did see a little Bryce Young last week, which was funny, and he had a good throw. He tossed the rock pretty solidly. They were just getting blown out, so he got put in over Andy Dalton. But I would imagine they'll still go with Andy Dalton. I'm curious to see if Jonathan Brooks plays. I don't think he'll get many carries, but he's definitely their running back of the future. Though Chuba Hubbard has been playing out of his mind to try and keep him off the field. We talked about the Panthers being one of the worst teams in the NFL. The Falcons they're winning right now, and they have the better players. So I like the Falcons on the road.
I got the Falcons as well. Cincinnati going to New York to take on the Giants on Sunday Night Football.
So just like the Cardinals and what I mentioned earlier, I know the Giants are at home, but I think they used up a little bit of that juju upsetting the Seahawks last week. I like the Bengals on the road. There's something about this Bengals team I just really want to like. Burrow is proven. They have Chase. They have Higgins. Sam Hubbard. He had a big safety last week, and that's one of our buddy's cousins, so that's kind of cool. But I don't know. I'm just not sold on this Giants team. Daniel Jones is not good. Malik Neighbors also is probably the only thing really going for them on offense. I know, like, Darius Slayton broke out last week, but I mean, if Neighbors is on the field, he's probably not going to get targeted as much. Wan'Dale Robinson is solid. Like, the pieces are there, I think, for the Giants offensively. I think they just need a quarterback, and unfortunately, this is a quarterback-driven league, and Burrow is the better quarterback. So my trend of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 road teams winning, which is probably a little absurd. I'm gonna call this road win week, and I like the Bengals on the road.
So I actually have the Giants to win this one purely for the fact that I'm just not buying into Cincinnati's defense. Their defense is terrible. It hasn't been good, especially the secondary. Just has not been good. You can throw all over this team. Baltimore did it last week. Washington did it a couple weeks ago. They're just kind of getting torched. Daniel Jones is not a good quarterback, but if there's a game that he can light up some numbers, this can be it. They're showing they have some talent. I mean, amazing what they did in Seattle. The game against Dallas the week before was boring, wasn't too great, but they were in it. They've kind of stayed in games this year, which has been surprising to me, even in games that they lost. I'm going to take the Giants. I think they squeak this one out. I don't know. I just think they squeak it out. Monday Night Football, Buffalo going to the Jets. We've talked about the Jets situation. I don't know if this is the greatest situation for them getting thrown on prime time, but Buffalo, who has also just not looked good the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, Buffalo's had a little rough go of it. I have the Jets here, and I think this can go any of two ways, and I'm going with the latter. So the first is the Jets are just completely depleted. They just lost their head coach. What are they playing for? Well, the latter is they have a new interim head coach. Let's play for him. And I think that, the season's not a wash yet. And this is a divisional game in a division that you mentioned is kind of a crapshoot with the poor quarterback play and just all these teams losing. I mean, Miami is not looking great. They're on to their third quarterback in Huntley. We already talked about the Patriots making a quarterback change. The Jets, and actually these two teams are the only teams, I guess, that technically have had their starter throughout the entire year. But I really have I don't know. I have no reason to pick the Jets, but I'm just going to pick them because I think they play for this interim coach.
I think the Jets win too. I think this is one of those things where the Jets don't come out with a lot of fire in this game. It's weird to say after week 6 the season might be done, but this team could fall apart pretty quick with the coach being fired. This thing could fall apart pretty quick, even in a bad division. So this team's got to come out with a lot of fire. Even if they lose close, they just can't get blown out. They're going to do it under a hostile home environment. I think the Jets have to win this game, so I'm taking the Jets. They lose this one, it's going to be tough. So let's bounce over to college football. There's a ton that happened last week, so I'm just going to let you jump into it. There's a lot that we got to talk about.
Yeah, I have my notes written out. Feel free to interrupt me as I go. So just like I called my picks road pick week, well, this past week in college football, I'm calling upset week because we had 7 top 25 teams upset. Obviously, with the most notable being Alabama, number 1. We saw number 4 Tennessee go down. Number 9 Missouri. Number 10 Michigan. Number 11 USC. Number 22 Louisville. And number 25 UNLV, which that slip up by UNLV possibly might have cost them their shot at the playoffs. I know they still have to play Boise State, but Boise State looks pretty damn good.
Yep.
So I'll kind of go in chronological order. Obviously, the biggest one was Alabama, and we'll get to that. But A&M absolutely pulverized Missouri at Kyle Field. I mean, Mizzou was on the ropes the week before and barely escaped Vanderbilt because they missed a field goal. But that was such a bad showing. I mean, I know they're on the road, but come on, you're supposedly the number 9 team in the country. Like, show a little more effort. Number 4 Tennessee. That one shocked me because I had them in my if I were to make a power ranking, Tennessee was like one of my top, probably my number 1 SEC team, to be honest. Like, from what they'd showed me in past games, they had an elite offense and an elite defense. But they were absolutely destroying teams. It was insane. They were, that quarterback, I can't think of his name. He's got some Samoan name. Dude looks like a freak. He's also ginormous. He's 6'6". That was shocking to me. Michigan, I don't think that one doesn't shock me as much just because I know we've talked about Michigan not being all that great. I wouldn't be surprised if they finished the year with like 3 or 4 losses. Number 10 was a little generous, and obviously they had that high ranking because they were coming off a national championship. But new head coach and new quarterback obviously has not done them well. USC also, we had previously outside of this podcast talked about that one not being too crazy. I think USC's, I know they lost at Michigan, but I think USC, I want to say they had more of a shot. At least they have a quarterback and an offense. That one was a little shocking. Louisville, I am not going to go into detail because I didn't watch that game or check in on that at all. They were also coming off a loss to Notre Dame, so their shots are pretty much done. And yeah, I had mentioned UNLV. So let me just mention a couple more of my notes, and then we can get back into the upsets. So SMU took down Louisville. That probably knocks them out. Navy and Army stay undefeated. They're looking like two really good teams. They probably both should be ranked at this point. Yep. Navy more so than Army. I talked about Blake Horvath, their quarterback. The guy, in my opinion, should probably be in the Heisman race. He's having a ridiculous season. They run a triple option, but I think he's thrown for like 8 or 9 touchdowns and then ran in for double-digit touchdowns. I mean, the guy, he's good. I'm putting Indiana up there with BYU. I think we need to start monitoring them and taking notice. BYU I mentioned last week. Indiana I'm mentioning this week. Both teams undefeated. Mm-hmm. Boise State rolled. And I think hands down, Gianti is the best running back in college football. The guy ran for 186 yards and 3 touchdowns. Not in the game, but in the first half. He sat out the second half. And now for the upsets. Let's start with, the big upsets. So Bama got stunned at Vandy. The coolest thing I got from that is it didn't even have to do with the game. I'll let you talk about the game. But I just want to talk about how the Vandy students and fans ripped out the goalpost after the game, walked 3 miles down Broadway Street, and tossed it in the Cumberland River. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was cool.
As for the upset, that might be one of the biggest upsets we've ever seen. Because Nick Saban came out and basically said, I don't really have to game plan for Vanderbilt. They're like the bottom of the barrel SEC. They're not good. So, Sean, I'm going to hand it over to you. Talk to me about Bama Vanderbilt.
You get one chance. I mean, Vanderbilt is the bottom of the SEC. As the new coach of Alabama, you get one mulligan. This is the mulligan. A lot of people forget that Nick Saban, I think it was year 1, lost to like Southern Miss. You get one. This is the one. This is the one. So, you can't lose again. It's just one of those things of, thank God they beat Georgia last week. But outside of the game, in fact, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, we're going to talk about it. I wouldn't be surprised if Alabama wins by 40 this week, to be honest with you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think this is also just a showing of what the NIL is doing to college football.
Yep.
I saw that a lot of these players on Vanderbilt, the quarterback too, or the quarterback especially, I should say, he came from a really good New Mexico State team. And some of these bottom barrel teams, if they can get some good transfers in, year over year, maybe the program doesn't last. So, like, say next year Vanderbilt's back to being, really bad. Because they've had some close wins. Like I said, they almost beat Missouri. So they could have gone back-to-back, beating Missouri number 9, or whatever they were last week. I don't know if they were number 9. But a ranked Missouri, and then taking down Alabama. So I don't want to say the powerhouses are gone, per se, in college football. But we might start seeing more of what we're seeing from this past week when it comes to upsets because I think the
But
parity is going to start really showing.
the one thing that's interesting too, because I know this is going to bleed into a couple of the games that you're about to talk about, and I'll just kind of give my answer really quick. The one thing that we're seeing is the SEC is kind of back to its dominance from 1 to 16 at this point, because there's 16 teams in that conference. That conference is beyond loaded. The bottom of the conference, which Vanderbilt just beat Alabama, Kentucky's really good, and like they're playing with everyone. Arkansas beat Tennessee. I mean, this conference is just beating up on one another from top to bottom, and it's going to be interesting to see who survives and what happens because you're definitely going to have a one loss for sure, one loss champion. It may be a two loss champion. The question is going to be how many of these SEC teams are they going to give at large bids to because this is a conference that's just going to shred each other apart this year. And there's some truth to say that I think only 4 of them are going to get in, but 8, 7 or 8 of the best teams, top 12 teams in the country, are definitely from the SEC, in my opinion. And they're not going to get some.
It's funny. It's funny because we get the move to a 12-team playoff, and then we're going to be right back where we were, like with the BCS or like with the 4-team college football playoff. I'm curious who that 13th team is,
Yeah.
or even just a SEC team that doesn't make it, who's like, hey, what the hell? We beat so and so this year, or we had 2 upsets, and we're ranked, but we're not getting the love like Alabama and Georgia and Texas do. Like, when do we get something to roll our way? But
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
it'll be interesting.
one thing I'm going to add to it, because we'll kind of bleed into this in a moment, but I'm jumping out of order here. I mean, one thing that's going to be interesting is what the committee values how the committee values strength of schedule this year, which we're going to start to see in a few weeks here, because the SEC is going to just beat up on one another. Yeah, I have a team in my top 12 right now in Iowa State, and the reason I've got Iowa State in there is they've looked good, they're playing well, but they play nobody. They're probably going to be 12-0. Like, the question is all right, so let's say they go 12-0, they go into the Big 12 championship, and they lose to a BYU. Are they going to get in at 12-1, or are you going to put an SEC team in that went 9-3, that lost to Kentucky, Georgia, and LSU? And this is my other thing with Clemson. I looked at Clemson's schedule. They've been playing well, but they got annihilated to Georgia, and the rest of the schedule they don't play a ranked team. They're gonna win. They're gonna probably go 11-1. What happens when, let's say, Miami slips up and it's Clemson, Miami, and they're both 11-1 in the championship game? It probably means one's getting in, one's not. So
Yeah, we might have like another Florida State situation like last year.
yeah, it's similar. It's like, but like just kind of watching these games and everything like that, it just feels like the SEC is just way ahead, conference top to bottom, than everyone else at this point. I mean, they've made. I mean, I knew Oklahoma was going to struggle. I mean, the SEC has literally made Oklahoma Stanford.
Mortal.
Nobody cares.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Right.
that's how ridiculous the conference is.
So, I'll read out my last couple notes. If you want to stem off anything, just let me know. So, Tennessee, I know we didn't really dive deep into them. You mentioned they lost to Arkansas, so that was a late score by Arkansas that got them the victory. So, it wasn't like Tennessee was losing all game or got blown out. Minnesota upset USC, and that was on a quarterback sneak with under a minute left in the game. Still a hell of a win. You mentioned Iowa State. They are probably the Big 12 favorite. I have 2 games left. So, one, We had a national championship rematch that we totally spaced on last week to talk about. Not that it's a huge game per se, but it is two Big Ten teams in Washington and Michigan. But the Huskies, they got the rematch to go in their favor, and obviously took down Michigan since Michigan was the number 10 team that got upset. And the last one I want to talk about, which was also just a hell of a late night cap to a crazy weekend of college, or I should say Saturday of college football. Miami rallied from down 25 with like 3 minutes left in the third quarter to hold off a potential upset at Cal, which happened to also be college game day. I was flipping back and forth between the Arizona. I don't even who the hell did we even play? Texas Tech and the Cal Miami game. I mean, it was I almost was staying on the Cal Miami game a little more than the Arizona game just because I was like, wow, is Miami like every time I'd switch back, it was like Miami's just inching a little bit closer. Here's a TD there. Here's a TD here. And all of a sudden, I was like, wait a second. Are they going to pull this off? There was a late controversial targeting that wasn't called on Miami that I know a lot of analysts were talking about. Brock Osweiler was actually, I believe, on the call, and he said that should have been targeting. So Miami narrowly, I mean, they won by one, and they seem to just keep squeaking it out. But
Yeah.
win's a win. But like you mentioned, I mean, so Miami goes undefeated. ACC, not a great conference compared to the SEC. I mean, you still have to put Miami in, I guess, right?
Well, their champion's gonna get in, so the champion will get in. The question is like, will they get two? It's like, what happens if Miami plays Clemson? Like, my question is like, Miami plays Clemson. Let's say Miami finishes undefeated. Clemson has the one loss to Georgia. Let's say Clemson beats Miami. Is Miami out?
Yeah, that's a good. I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's gonna be tough. I'm glad I'm not on that committee because, like, I mean, yeah, like you said earlier. So BYU, Iowa State, say they both go in undefeated, and one of those teams, BYU wins, they're in. Obviously, that they win their championship game. Iowa State wins, they're in. But then, do you put a one-loss BYU team in, or do you? I'd have to look at the schedule. Maybe BYU. I don't even know if BYU and Iowa State play each other. They might play each other in the regular season. I'm not sure what the schedules are, but just say they both go undefeated, like, and one of them loses in the championship game. Like, did they get a second team in? I don't.
And then, I mean, sure enough, certain things are going to play themselves out as the season goes on. We're still pretty early in the season, but I don't know. Let's jump into a couple of the key matchups this week. There's a lot of great matchups. We're going to focus in on 5, just kind of rapid fire, really quick off of them. Then we're going to do our playoff picks, and that'll be that. So first game we kind of talked about already, South Carolina heading to Alabama. Alabama not falling down to 7. I think Alabama's just going to rout them, but what do you think?
Alabama, I mean, there's no way that they're happy, obviously, with what occurred last week. So, yeah, Alabama's not losing this game. They're not losing back-to-back weeks.
Yeah. One of the best rivalries in college football, Texas taking on Oklahoma. Texas now in the 1 spot. Oklahoma holding 18. I'm going to take Texas. I don't think this is going to be very close, but we've seen weird things throughout the years. What do you think is going to happen?
I like Texas. Neither team is on the road or home since this game's at the Cotton Bowl like it gets played at every year. But I don't know. Weird stuff happens during the Red River rivalry. I'm not going to say Texas blows out Oklahoma. We've seen some weird. I mean, years that Oklahoma's dominant, they lose to Texas. Years that Texas is dominant, they lose to Oklahoma. But, like you said, I just haven't seen it really yet out of Oklahoma. I like Texas.
Same deal. Arizona going to BYU. BYU 14, Arizona unranked.
Yeah, I'm taking Arizona in this game, not because I'm a fan, but because it would just be such an Arizona thing to do, to win at Utah, come home for your, Big 12 season opener, lose to Texas Tech, and then come back and just win at BYU, who's number 14 in the country. I mean, Doesn't make any sense, but it wouldn't surprise me, especially because I really, really, really want to believe that this Arizona team's better than it is. Fafita's not playing well. Yeah, I don't know. I could go on forever, but yeah, I like Arizona on the road, and yeah, we'll see if BYU is the real deal because they cannot afford to lose if they want to make it to the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm also taking. I know. Sorry, I'm taking BYU in this one. Um, the thing I found weird about this one though was BYU's almost only favored by 6. BYU's looked good all season, so I think that 6 is weird given the fact that it's in Utah, not an easy place to play. But yeah, Arizona's been weird. Some weeks they look really good. Some weeks they look really bad. I don't know what to make of them. Probably game of the week. This is where college game day is going. Number 2, Ohio State taking on number 3, Oregon. It's in Eugene. Who do you got?
I know you're not going to like to hear this, but I have Ohio State on the road. They just seem like the more dominant team. Oregon just hasn't. They're winning, but they're not dominating like I thought maybe they would, especially with getting a, what is he, 6th-year quarterback, Dylan Gabriel. Like, their run game is what won them the game last week. And yeah, I don't know. Oregon needs to really show me something, or else to me they're kind of a they're a pretender. I think they'll go to the playoffs, but I wouldn't consider them a title favorite yet. There's still a long season to go. Like I said, Gabriel is experienced, and maybe it's just taking him a little while to get adjusted to a new offense. And but I like Ohio State. I think some of those receivers they have are just ridiculous. And they have a great running back too, so I like Ohio State on the road.
So I see this as like a true coin flip game. The reason why I'm taking Oregon is because it's at Oregon. That's literally it. Ohio State hasn't played anybody. We haven't really heard much about Ohio State all year, and a lot of that's because they haven't played anybody. Oregon really hasn't played
That's true.
anyone. Oregon really hasn't played anyone either. Granted, we thought they wouldn't have had to play anyone up to this point. Boise State's turning out to be a much better team than we ever thought. That game was a real nail biter, and a month ago it was like, oh my god, how good is this Oregon team coming off of the Idaho scare? And then Boise State, they barely squeaked by. It looks like a lot better of a win right now than it did when it happened. There's a good chance that both these teams basically have been just waiting all season for this matchup. So I'm expecting both teams to come out with fire and to look really good. If you're expecting to have like a sequel to the Georgia Alabama thing, don't expect it. I think it's going to be a little bit more sloppy than that. I think they're going to see two defenses. It's going to be a different played game. So I don't expect this to be the greatest game of all time. I can see it going either way. I'm giving the edge to Oregon because it's at home. In the end, will this matchup probably happen again at the end of the year? Yeah, I think this is probably going to be the Big Ten championship. I don't really see either of these teams losing the rest of the way. So I think this is going to be your championship, and this is going to be the appetizer for it. Do both these teams make the playoff? Yeah, probably. Ole Miss going on number 9. Ole Miss taking on number 13 LSU in Baton Rouge.
I like Lane Kiffin. I think Jackson Dart has more experience and is a better quarterback. So I like Ole Miss on the road.
I will take Ole
Really don't
Miss.
have much detail,
Yeah,
but I like Ole Miss.
I got Ole Miss as well. All right, let's jump into your playoff. Who's your 12 teams before you sign off?
So SEC, I got Texas. Big Ten, I'm still keeping Ohio State. ACC, still keeping Miami. Big 12, I switched to Iowa State. And Boise State is still my mid-major. And as for the rest of them, I got 3 SEC teams in Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee. 2 Big Ten teams in Oregon and Penn State. I do have Clemson as an ACC team because, like you said, I think they're gonna probably win out, and we haven't seen there's gonna be more weird upsets and losses out of teams we just won't probably expect. And here's my kicker, which, yeah, we'll see if this happens or not. But another team that very much could win out. My last team making it in is Notre Dame.
We are pretty similar. So 10 of them are the same. Miami, Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Iowa State, Boise State, Notre Dame are all the same. My changes are I have Ole Miss over Tennessee. Reason for that, Tennessee's got a brutal schedule the rest of the way. And then I got BYU over Clemson. I don't know why. I like BYU, and I think BYU. I like BYU. So
I was just going to say the best thing about this is that if we were to look back at when we first started this, it's like, yeah, we have some teams that have stayed in it the whole time, but like, we were saying Notre Dame had a cakewalk schedule, and it's taken upsets for them to kind of squeak back in for us to both put them in there. But next week, I mean, yeah, I don't know. Watch Oklahoma. If Oklahoma beats Texas, I mean, Texas, yeah, they probably stay in there for now, but then obviously someone jockeys them and goes into that number one SEC slot. So yeah, who knows?
Who knows? All right. Well, that's another week. A lot of football. James, good luck. Wedding this weekend.
Yeah, one thing I'm gonna preface, since I am getting married, Sean and I are probably not gonna be watching as much football over this weekend, or at least catching up via our phones and highlights. So we are putting out an episode next week. It might be a little later on in the week compared to what we normally do, but we will get one out. It might just be a little subdued when it comes to analysis.
Yep. True that. All right, guys. Well, thank you for watching. I greatly appreciate it. And have a good time watching football. And baseball. Baseball's been wild. That's a whole different story. We'll talk later.
Oh, yeah.